This easy kielbasa soup, or bachelor stew as I decided to call it, is a dish my husband used to make now and then before we moved in together. It only takes 15 minutes to prepare, it uses cheap ingredients, and it will feed you lunch for a whole work week. Here's what you'll need: half a head of cabbage, 2 pounds of kielbasa or any smoked sausage, an onion, a few garlic cloves, 3 carrots, 5 potatoes, salt, black pepper, broth or water, and a slow cooker or Instapot. You make this recipe by chopping the ingredients, dumping them into a slow cooker, and cooking them for several hours, or only 1 hour probably if you're using an Instapot. That's really all there is to it, but we'll talk you through the steps. See the video description for a written recipe along with some notes and substitutions and ways to make this recipe even easier than it already is. Now let's get started. Roughly chop half of your cabbage. My husband cut it into quarters and sliced it first. When he got to the core, he cut that part out here, and I'm freezing it so I can turn it into a vegetable stock later. It's a great way to save money, but it's totally optional. Then he turned the cabbage slices 90 degrees and cut them again. Dump the chopped cabbage into a large slow cooker or Instapot. The cabbage will cook down quite a bit, so you don't have to chop it perfectly. If you don't want to deal with a leftover half of a cabbage, most stores do sell halves of cabbage wrapped in plastic, so just buy that instead. You could also just buy pre-shredded cabbage in a bag and use that. Then roughly chop an onion. I've shown in detail before on this Easy Gentle Cooking series how I like to chop onions, but this is the way my husband does it. He cuts the onion in half through both its north and south poles. Then he cuts the tops and bottoms off of each half and peels off the skin. The onion will cook down quite a bit, so you don't have to chop it perfectly. Dump the onion on top of the cabbage, and I'm saving the onion trimmings for stock as well. Next, add a few garlic cloves. Here, my husband is crushing them with the side of the knife to remove the skins. They only need a rough chop. If you want to save time, you can always buy pre-chopped garlic in a jar and use a couple spoonfuls. Then chop your potatoes into big chunks. If you run into any bruises or eyes, just cut those out. You can peel the potatoes if you want, but it's not necessary. If you don't want to bother cutting potatoes, you could always buy a bag of small potatoes and just dump those in whole. Then chop 3 carrots. If you don't want to bother chopping carrots, just buy a little bag of baby carrots and add a couple handfuls. I saved the carrot trimmings for stock. Then I put the whole container of vegetable scraps into the freezer so that when I have enough scraps saved up later, I can make the stock then. Add a teaspoon of salt. Go easy with the salt. You can always add more, but you can never take salt out if you've added too much. Now my husband is adding a spoonful of black peppercorns. Just add pre-ground black pepper if you don't have whole peppercorns. Add a bay leaf if you've got one. It's not necessary, but it's nice. And lastly, the kielbasa. My husband is just roughly chopping it into large bite-sized chunks. You can use any sausage you like, but a pre-cooked smoked sausage like kielbasa works well for this dish, and it's what my husband usually uses. If you don't feel like chopping anything, just put the sausage in whole, or use a few packets of Little Smokies. Then dump in 1 to 4 cups of broth. We're using homemade goose broth here, but if you don't happen to have homemade goose broth on hand, you could use any broth you have, even water. Add less broth if you don't want it to be soupy, and add more broth if you want it to be a soup. Then secure the lid of the slow cooker and cook it on high for 4 hours. If you're using an Instapot, it will probably only take an hour or less. Basically, cook it until the potatoes are soft and done. And when it is done, it will look like this. Store the rest of the leftovers in containers in the fridge for up to a week. Freeze anything you can't eat by then for up to 3 months. If you want more easy recipes like this, check out my Easy Gentle Cooking playlist in the video description. And this video was brought to you by Britt, Honey Badgers, Megan M, Matthew, Jenny D, Jocelyn, Gina F, Megan B, Data Fox, Gina S, Ruth, Katie, Lonesome Screams, Mihir, Morgan, Veet Vatho, Britta, Veda, Colette, and Anna.